Hello friends, how are you all? So friends, today I will show you what is Docker Compose file and how you can use a Docker Compose file to run a multiple container in a Docker application. So in my previous video, I shown you how we can use a Docker to run an Nginx container. If you haven't watched that video, please go and watch that video. I will add the link in the description. So in this video, we will mainly focus on a Docker Compose. So without wasting any time, let's start this video. So first of all, we will create a folder. So let's create a folder and let's say Docker Compose Learning. And within that folder, we will create a simple Docker Compose file, and that will be Docker Compose, and it should be YML. So make sure that you name it correctly. So it should always be docker-compose, and the file extension will be YML, which is a YAML file. So let's open this in Visual Studio Code. Right. And before you write anything in a Docker Compose file, make sure that your Docker is running. You can always check by running this command docker version, and make sure that you have both the client and the server running on your machine. And the next thing you need to check is the version. So in my case, the Docker version that I'm using is 20.10.8. So when you define here Docker Compose file, first you need to provide a version number. So I'm using 3.8. So what is this 3.8? So this is a Docker Compose version file. So I will show you what I mean. So if you type Docker Compose version, and if you open this document file, so you can always go to Docker docs to get like more information about the Docker. So over here, if you check this Docker engine release, you'll see the Docker engine version is 19.031, right? So when we check the Docker engine installed in our machine is 20. So for Docker engine, like 19 and above, you will need to use this Docker Compose basically as 3.8. So depending upon what kind of Docker engine install on your machine, like you need to use that version file, that Compose version file. So in my case, I'm using 3.8, which is this. All right. So once you define the version, the next thing is to define what services that you want to run. So let's say I want to run MySQL and adminer. Then what I need to do is I need to define those services over here. So let's say I want to run one database and a client, and maybe you can name it anything. I will call adminer. So adminer will be the client to run the database. So after that, what we need is we need to define those services. So for that, like the best thing to start with is always use the Docker Hub. So within the Docker Hub, let's say if you want to use MySQL, then what you need to do is simply search for MySQL, and over here you will find some description, like about what is MySQL. And if you want to use in a Docker Compose file, you will see it has given you an example. So I'll just copy those script from here and let's copy paste over here. So maybe, and let's reduce that one, and let me increase the size. So over here you can see that I have defined two services. One is the database and one is the adminer. So for database, I'm using the image MySQL, and this is the default command that you can see over here, and I'm defining this restart as always, meaning like if something goes on the container, the container will always get restarted. And lastly, an environment variable where I'm defining the password for my database. So instead of using example, maybe you can use something different. Let's say learn with Sanz, right? And the next services that we are using is adminer. So adminer is simply the client. It's the client that you can use to connect the MySQL. So the image that we are using for adminer is the adminer, restart as always, and here we are mapping this port. So the left side port is the port port of the host, and the right side is the port number for the adminer. So you can always change your host port. Maybe let's say you call it 8099. But that should always be this one, 8080 for this adminer. Now once you have properly defined those services, let's save it and let's run this Docker Compose. So first thing, just check if the Docker Compose does exist, and yes, it does. So I'm using Docker Compose 1.29.2. so the next thing is run Docker Compose and up. So when you are running this command, make sure that you are in the right folder where you have this Docker file. And once you are in the right folder, just run this command Docker Compose and up, and this will simply fire up like the command to pull those images into your machine if that doesn't exist, and then it will start those container for you. And we have another parameter -d, which means we are running those like whatever things happening, like we are running those container in the background. So D stands for running the container in a Daemon mode. So now if you press enter, and let's say Docker Compose, and you can always run Docker Compose ps to check if there is, so you can see up, and when you use like Docker Compose, for naming, like it will always take that folder name. So since I created Docker Compose learning folder, so it is using that folder name as a prefix, and then the service name, which is adminer, and the next one is the DV, right? So they both are up and running, and over here you will see the port mapping. So for adminer I'm mapping 8099, so you can simply test by going onto localhost and 8099 and right. And to log into your database for MySQL, it will always be the root, that is the root user. And for passport, we say it is as learn with Sanz, right? Learn with Sanz, yes. So if you click login, you will see that we have now logging into the database. So this is how you can use, like a Docker Compose to run multiple container. Now let's try something else. So at the moment, if you look at the Docker Compose file, we are running two services, right? So DV and adminer. And suppose if you want to run Nginx, then what you can do is you can say Nginx, and then you need to provide the image and like those ports. So again, as I mentioned, always go to Docker Hub and search for Nginx, and over here also you can just read, if you need some more information on what is Nginx. And the main important thing is over here. So you can see for Nginx it will always run on port 80, and you need to define the image, right? So for this one, what I will do is I'll go into the tags, and over here you can find so many images for Nginx. And I personally like Alpine because that is a very small size, which will be good enough for this video. So mainline Alpine. Okay, so let's say we will use this image. So just copy image, paste. So what I'm doing is I'm defining the image, which is Nginx, and this is my tag, right? And next thing is to define the port. So as I mentioned, like Nginx will always run on port 80, but for host I will say I will run on 8011 and 80, right? So here you can see now we have additional container, and now if you go to the command line and if you say Docker Compose up, what will happen? Let's see. So you can see some logs over here. So before I run the command in a daemon mode, so you were not able to see those logs, but this time I haven't used the daemon mode, so you can see all those logs coming over here, right? And it say that Nginx is starting. So let's say we run the another command and let's type Docker Compose and ps. So that command will actually show you all the container that is running, which is defined in this Docker Compose file. So you will see 1, 2, yes. So you'll see it's running now. The Docker Compose is running the adminer, it's running DV, and it's running Nginx, right? and you can see the port mapping 8011 mapping to port 80. So let's check this one. Sorry, localhost 8091, right? I forget the port number. 8011, sorry. And boom, you can see welcome to Nginx. So last thing that you need to understand on Docker Compose is if you want to stop those containers. So over here you can see they all are running, and now if you want to stop all those containers in Docker Compose, you will run Docker Compose and down. No, sorry, Docker Compose and stop. So this will stop all those containers that is running within this Docker Compose. So you can say Docker Compose PS, and you will see the state they are all exit, so they are all stop. So with Docker Compose, like there are other things that you can also do. So to learn more, you can always run Docker Compose and -s, and this will give you all those commands that you can use with Docker Compose. So you can use this build to build or rebuild the services, the down to stop and remove the resources, like the images to list what sort of images are used in this Docker Compose files, and so many. So you just need to play with all of them. And I hope you learned something today, and if you love this video, please give thumbs up and share this video with your friends. And if you want to learn more like such video in the future, please subscribe my channel. And in one of my past video, I make a video related to running the SQL Server in a Docker. So if you are interested, I will put the link in the description where you can go and check that video, where I show you like how you can easily run the SQL Server in a Docker container. So friends, I will see you next time in the next video. So take care, bye.